Thank you for tuning in to Restores the Truth Ministries. I'm Yishak Ben Yasharel, sharing with you another Scripture Nugget. Today's Scripture Nugget will be based on the Book of Genesis or Bereshith, chapter 1 and portion of chapter 2. And what we'll find is that Yah will be setting up a Torah culture in which we all should live by and follow. Now, before we go into Genesis or Bereshith, let's look at the book of Yeshayahu, chapter 46, or Isaiah chapter 46, verse 9 and verse 10. It says, "Remember the former events of old, for I am El, or I am Al, and there is no one else, Elohim, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from of old that which has yet been done, saying, my counsel does stand, and all my delight I do." Now, what is Yah saying in these verses? He's saying that, number one, that I am all. There's no one else. I am by myself. I am the one that creates. So he says he's declaring the end from the beginning. The end from the beginning. The end of what? His plan. He's declaring his plan from the beginning. And in order to understand Yah's plan, you must understand the beginning. He encodes it or writes it in the beginning. He writes it in the Torah, which is our foundation. He writes it in the Book of Bereshith, which is our beginning. And he ends up in verse 10 by saying, my counsel does stand. What is his counsel? His plan. And so the question is, what is Yah's plan? Well, in Bereshith chapter 1, it says, in the beginning, Elohim created the Shamayim and the earth. Now, this verse automatically identifies who the creator is. It shows his omnipotence. It shows his creativity. Now, as any author, an author automatically knows the end of a story. What an author does, he goes and he begins to write. And what he's writing is the ending, but he's doing it from a beginning. That's why you have a chapter 1 and it goes on to the end of the book. But he knows the end already. Only the author knows the end. So as you begin to read the beginning of a book, you begin to map out a series of plans or things that connects you to the end. So let's continue in Bereshith chapter 1 and we'll see again some of the plan or the plan of Yah in this particular text. Now, as you begin to read and focus on the creativity of Yah, specifically in these verses, in verses 3 through 5, you'll see that Yah began to speak concerning the light and darkness, day and night. What he's doing is he is actually showing the creativity, but yet again the separatism, but the assigned separatism that works in harmony with the other. Light works in harmony with darkness. Day or yom works together with night. There's a plan there. Then he goes on in verse 6 through 8. He talks about the expanse or the firmament. He separates the firmament from the waters, from the Shamayim. He began to separate. Then in verse 9 and through verse 13, he talks about the waters upon the earth. He began to separate waters or divide them from the land, from the earth. Again, there's a harmonious action here, a harmonious plan, but at the same time within the plan, there is separation. But the separation works in harmony with what is being separated. Now, in verse 14 through verse 19, again in Bereshith chapter 1, you see there's lights in the firmament or in the expanse. For what reason? For signs, for appointed times, or moed, or moedim. And just by that alone, he's telling you what? The Shabbats. So all of this is in the beginning. And then in verses 20 through verse 23, he talks about the creatures and the animals. They are created, but yet again, they are separate and distinctive from each other. But yet they work in harmony with what? Some work in harmony with the day. That's why we see certain animals in the day or in the yom. Then we see certain animals at night. Now, where's day and night? Day and night, light and darkness on the first day. Then he talks about the firmament. Where does creatures and the animals operate? Day and night, yom and night, up on the earth, in the firmament, but also up on the water. Everything is in harmony with each other. Separate, distinctively, but yet they're in harmony. There's a plan there. Now let's begin to look at chapter 26 and verses 31. Chapter 26 through verse 31. Now we get into day 6. And specifically, let's look at verse 26 and verse 30. But in 26, he says, and Elohim said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the shamayim, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping creatures that creep upon the earth. Now what we see here is Elohim creating mankind to maintain rule or dominion. One translation says dominion, but it's not dominion or rule as in to persecute, but dominion and rule to make sure everything harmonizes together with what he already created. Nothing he creates causes disharmony, even though there is a separation and a distinction from one and the other, but it's all in harmony. So he creates man to have rule or to have dominion, to make sure the pattern or the plan of Yah is carried out. Now look at this. Let's go down to verse 30. Let's start in verse 29. And Elohim said, see, I have given you every plant that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it is for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the shamayim, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is life, every green plant is for food. And it came to be so. Now I want to kind of stay right here for a moment. Look what it says. It says, every beast of the earth, every bird of the shamayim, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is life, every green plant is for food. Now we understand there is a great movement within Yasharel and within people to go strictly plant-based and strictly vegan. But I want you to look at something here. The term is in which there is life. Another translation says where there is life, or wherein is life. That's a key right there. Every beast of the earth, and to every bird of shamayim, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is life. Now, he's not just talking about just eating animals. What he's talking about is a distinction. Remember, Yah does a separation for a harmonious act, that goes with his plan. So he is actually declaring unto you and I, he's declaring unto us, Tahor and Tameh, clean and unclean. Just that phrase alone is giving us a distinction. There's a distinction in which there is life. Every animal where therein is life. See, all animals has life. So surely he's not saying every animal. And to prove that, you can look at what happened in Deuteronomy or Devarim, chapter 14 and chapter 11, where Moshe even break down the difference in clean and unclean. Tahor and Tameh. He breaks it down. So it is obvious that Yah is telling us there is a distinction in what meat to eat. So even in the book of Bereshith, we begin to see the plan of Yah for mankind. We begin to see a separation of day and night. Again, that's a time. we begin to see the distinction and the separation of animals. We begin to see the distinction and separation of the waters, the firmament, and the lights that was created, the sun, the moon, the stars, for what appointed time. We begin to see that. And so we now begin to see that when he created man for dominion or rule. Not persecution, dominion and rule, to make sure everything harmonizes to the plan of Yah. Now let's look at something here. Let's go over to the chapter 2, Bereshith chapter 2. It says, and what we see here is, it says, and Yahuwah Elohim took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. Verse 15, rather, to work it and to guard. The word guard is shamar, which is to preserve, to protect, to attend to. You see that? He places man in a distinct location in order for man to have rule or have dominion. So he gave man the commission to guard or to shamar, again, which is to preserve and to protect. It means to attend to. So now he is attending to what? To that which he gave man dominion over. Everything works in harmony. In verse 24, chapter 2 of Bereshith, he says, for this cause, after he created humankind and Hava and Eve, or Isha, and Adam, Ish, man came together. Look what happened. He says, for this cause, man, Ish, should leave his father's house and his mother, his Imah, leave her house, leave the father's house, and cleave to his wife. What is he saying here? He's given man the order in which he should follow to continue the plan of Yah. This is just not an order of marriage. This is an order for man or Ish to leave his father's house. What does that mean? It means the father's rule and the father's vision. It means to leave his mother, who has the sphere of influence. So again, separation for a harmonious act. Why? Because there is a development and extension of the plan of Yah that must keep going. So once a man, once an Ish, once an Isha, once a woman and a man come together, they are to align themselves with Elohim and not their father's rule, not their father's vision, not their mom's sphere of influence, but the recurring pattern of the Torah, or the process that Yah has planned out. So now we begin to see how all this works together. We see the end of Yah, or the plan of Yah, in the beginning. Shalom, shalom. See you next time on Scripture Nuggets.